up in solidarity. And that's another thing that I want to even have this conversation with you, because I really think at some point, and I'm going to probably do a solo cast on it too, and we'll have another podcast together to dive a little bit deeper into it. But it's time to have an honest conversation about Black Lives Matter. I believe. I think now, if anything else, like let's start separating the two here, and let's start also asking and prying in what is the purpose here? What do you got? What do we actually want? All right, because do we want chaos? Burning down the building of a business that's in support of you, that's not gonna help anything get anything done. You're not gonna do. In fact, what you're doing is now turning the public against you. But then again, it's not the people on the ground. I do not believe it's the Black Lives Matter activists on the ground, because I know some of them who actually put together these rallies and genuinely feel like, hey, like, we need justice. We have to march. Like, some of the peaceful rallies we've seen on the Cap, they're doing it the right way. And then there's another group of people who've got a lot of freaking money behind them, right? And they come in from different, they're probably not even of these communities, but they come in from different areas, wherever they coming from. Black Lives Matter, they're claiming Black Lives Matter, but then they're pulling this garbage. They're pulling this kind of stunt where you're burning down buildings, you're going after federal offices and buildings, like things like that. That's a problem, because now if you look at it, if you're starting to turn public opinion against the plight that we're trying to go for and what we're trying to fight for. And now people less and less stop seeing, okay, maybe, do we stand with these people? Like, what's going on here? Like, I'm trying to help out and they're hurting us. So are they for us or against us? And it's time that we actually have an honest conversation about that, because I believe that it's part of the reason why this whole George Floyd thing, the opportunity that we had, was kind of wasted if you really think about it. Because when this whole thing broke out, the nation, for a split second, for a moment, we came together and said, this is awful. What happened to this man, this was awful. And then we protested. We had everyone. You mentioned in our last podcast. Hey, I saw people of all races, all colors. I saw grandmas in wheelchairs all out there in support of this man. It didn't matter anymore, because what we saw in the context in that situation, it was wrong. But then all of a sudden things got crazy. Then all of a sudden innocent people started getting hurt. Innocent businesses started getting hurt. And then you start to see the public opinion of Black Lives Matter and the protests start to change. And then we're back into the same divide again. And it's ridiculous. I think it's high time we start having an honest conversation about this, so it removes the division that it's sowing in our communities right now.
I agree with you. And before I give any answers, because I know there's listeners, this is a very hot topic, and some may think, why are you asking a white dude about this?
Yeah.
But I think it's because me and Drew can have this conversation, because we have a respect and appreciation for one another.
Absolutely.
Who we are, is why we have this conversation. And as I said before, I love everybody and respect everybody for who they are. Not what their culture is, not what they look like, for who they are. Because that's what matters. You strip away the skin and everything, we're all the same. We bleed the same color, we breathe the same air.
Absolutely.
No one's better than... We're all just different covers of a book. That's all we are.
Absolutely.
That's all it is.
Absolutely.
I've never been one to tolerate racism in any form whatsoever. I've never had any respect for it. I've never been tolerant of it. No, nothing. And I've come from a lot of different walks of life. From the hood to middle class, high class. I've been a little bit everywhere. And I still know better to not drop the N-bomb because I know better. And I know the differences between the one ending with the letter A and the R. But still not appropriate for me to do that. Because it's a respect for everybody else.
Absolutely.
So, to me, it's like anytime I hear something where you put a color before something, that's when racism starts. That's when you're secluding yourself or separating yourself. And to me, it seems like you're putting yourself above everybody else when I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't believe just Black Lives Matter. I believe everybody's life matters, because we're all human.
Absolutely.
We're all given one life to live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, it's up to the individual on how you're going to live that life and what you're going to do with that life.
Yeah.
And then the common denominator between Michael Blake and George Floyd was that regardless of their past and what their history said, they were human beings that did not need to get killed.
Yeah.
There were options. There were things that could have been avoided to where you could have done your jobs. You could have served justice the right way. But instead, in a moment of, I don't know what you'll call it, it's definitely not passion. And if it is, you got a fucked up way of looking at it.
Yeah, big time.
But I can't say passion, but a moment of heat. You know, with the George Floyd situation and that douchebag that was on his neck, that cop knew what the hell he was doing.
Yeah.
He knew.
There was no question.
There was no other way around that.
There was no question.
One of the old school racist bastards. You know, but then you take a Michael Blake situation, he's walking around his car, opens the door, reaches in, and everything happens so goddamn fast, and you're just like, what do you do?
Yeah.
You don't know what he was reaching for,
Yeah.
if he had a pistol in his hand, if he didn't have a pistol in his hand. But back to my original point,
Yeah.
you had your hands on his shirt, and there was another cop right next to you. No one was running in on them.
Yeah.
Nobody was bombarding them. They both could have pulled him out and took him down, handcuffed him, whatever, detained him, whatever the case was. They did not need to shoot him 7 times in the back.
Yeah. And that's another thing I was even thinking about, because it's just like when you talk about the optics of the whole thing, it's just, okay, we don't know. Obviously, it sucks in that situation. We don't know. You know, being in that mentality, being in that state, it's difficult. You see somebody go in their car. What do you think is going to happen, right? But do you think that also goes to part of their training, where we actually have to start, like, I don't know, trying to figure out how to get more these officers to start exercising a lot more restraint with just not only particularly with African American communities and minority communities that they interact with, but just in with everybody, because we see this all the time. We see cops who are in yeah, it's not a passionate thing or a passionate moment, but I think it's more of like an anxiety kind of thing, right? And it goes to the and the way I see it, I think it goes to the kind of nature of people who are being hired into these positions. First of all, the nature of the pay that these individuals are getting. First of all, second of all, and then the kind of consequences that aren't there for when things like this happen, right? I have friends with people who are members of the military, right? And they have stricter rules of engagement than some of our law enforcement professionals. That makes no sense to me, right? These guys are overseas, they're fighting, and they're dealing with stone cold killers that are firing back every single day. And they show more restraint to the civilians there, which you can't tell who's a terrorist and who's not a terrorist, right? They show way more restraint than our law enforcement officers here. What do you think that needs to be changed in their training to get them to to the standards our soldiers are being held to at this point?
I honestly don't know, man. Be quite honest with you, because I think as situations have escalated and they have gone to a much more dangerous degree as the situations have transpired, I think there are training changes. I don't think there's just one solid system that works for all situations. Because the world we live in today is drastically changing, and I don't always think it's always in a good way.
Yeah.
So the more dangerous it gets, the more extreme you have to be.
Yeah.
And it's a messed up situation too, because in situations like this that you have, there still are a lot of good cops out there who just want to do their job and do right, and they're not on the BS that a lot of these other cops are. And with these two cops involved with, Michael Blake, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Who really knows? I mean, it's not like we had footage from the George Floyd situation that took place where shit could have been avoided, and you had a douchebag cop exercising excessive force that hurt him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't know if these cops were like him. You know what I mean? We don't know if they just got scared and they saw him reach and he wouldn't stop and they did their training.
Yeah.
We don't know. We really don't. The principle overall is that it could have been avoided.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
And it bothers the crap out of me when I see stuff like this, and to prove, and I'm going to throw something out there for you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to prove to all my listeners right here that this isn't just a racial thing. Because back in 2015, and Drew, tell me if you remember this. Back in 2015, in Neenah, Wisconsin, there was a hostage situation at a motorcycle club.
Yep.
And this guy came in, and I know a lot about this because I met the owner of that motorcycle club and some very dear people, and I went to a live radio show, so I have it on first-hand basis.
Yep.
For the knowledge.
Please tell the audience. Tell the audience.
Basically, what had happened was there was a guy, I can't remember his name, but basically he was a member of the motorcycle club, but he screwed up his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going downhill really fast, doing a lot of drugs, a lot of drinking, and he got himself arrested. So he had to post bail, so what he did was he sold his bike to the club to post bail. He got out, got back involved with drugs and alcohol again, and went downward spiral all over again, and went back to the club to get his bike, and brought a gun with him.
Oh, God.
He walked in, and his bike was taken apart, and he said, I want my bike put back together. If it isn't, I'm shooting everybody in here. Everybody in the club was remaining calm. The shooter wasn't shooting nobody. They were doing what he asked. The owner was downstairs, and one of the members called down there and told him what was going on. He called the police. It took the police 45 minutes to respond. 45 minutes. So finally, they show up, and they're going to go in through the garage door. And YouTube has removed the video of this. I wish they had it because I've seen a lot of it. Everything I say will be backed. It will be true.
Yeah.
So they come in, a firefight happens. A fire extinguisher gets hit. The place gets filled with smoke. One cop gets grazed in the helmet by a stray bullet, and they all come running out. So they all come running out. The hostage taker tells one of the guys, and which happens to be the oldest guy in the place. I think he was like in his 70s for crying out loud. His name was Michael Funk, by the way. The hostage taker tells him, go close that door, and if you run, I'm going to shoot you. The hostage does so. He gets to the door, and right as he's ready to close it, he bolts out the door, runs down the alley, and hides behind the car. He had his conceal and carry with him and his license, and he's hiding behind the car, watching for the guy who was taking hostages.
Yep.
He turns around, and the police shoot him 9 times in the chest. The police shot a hostage 9 times in the chest. A 70-year-old man. So as I said, you guys, BLM and all y'all, got every right to be pissed off. Don't think that it's just happening to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is 5 years ago.
Yeah.
This has gone to the Supreme Court. The system has failed.
Yep.
They're making a movie about this, and people are not letting up about it because everybody knows this was a glamorized murder.
Yeah.
They got medals for this. All the officers got medals for this.
It's disgusting.
Like you're really proud of yourself. The guy's mother passed away a couple months later. That was her only son, mind you. So let it be known. Don't think this is a cultural thing. It's not.
Yeah.
The media likes to pick on the African American culture because y'all have a lot of heart.
Yeah, and I want to touch upon that.
Hold it down.
Yeah, I want to touch upon that because that makes dude, and that's something that I've been thinking about because there's a reason why, and people the people on the right side of things who complain about, okay, well, why doesn't the media talking about this, or why aren't they talking about this situation or that situation? Here it is, right? Because we understand that the African American community, because we stand our ground and we will go out and we will protest. Hence, because of what our predecessors like Martin Luther King and all the other freedom fighters did, they know that we can do that. And for them, that's an opportunity because it's one of those things where it's so polarizing, like I said before. If it bleeds, it leads. So they focus more of their attention on that situation. They focus more attention on that because it's one of those things that generates a lot more views, generates a lot more eyes on that situation. So when you look at it, yeah, that's why you can see that there's a disconnect in terms of how the media reports one thing versus the other. And this goes to show you that, okay, this is a thing where we all now should start coming together because we can't just have one group, just because something happens to the other person, go out and fight and then not have everyone come in and stand together. It's one of those things where, look, man, this is what they want. A nation divided is a nation easily conquered. A nation when it's people, right? And we have to understand, and you mentioned this earlier, it's not strictly based off of race. It's purely economics, not just race. It's one of those things where if you are not economically valuable and they don't deem you as it, the state, because this is the common denominator, these guys, the government, will come in and they don't care if you're poor, they don't care if you're powerless. That's why they can shoot a hostage, right, and get medals for it because that's what the state does. And you have to understand the common denominator is the state is killing us. We have to have an honest conversation about how law enforcement is treating our people. Everyone, by our people, not just black, Americans.
Yes. Yes.
We have to start honestly having a conversation about these outdated practices. And I think probably in terms of like training, there needs to be a lot more accountability, not to just to these officers, but the people above them. To people above them. Because if you really think about it, if I'm a police chief of a department or a city, and I know that I could also be held accountable for the misbehaviors of one of my officers, I could be held accountable. I could potentially, my job's on the line. That's more of an incentive for me to make sure that my team acts right. And on top of that, that's more of an incentive for me to say if one of the officers misbehave, you got to get penalized. Just like right now with this whole thing with these officers, the right thing could have done is, hey, you guys are on leaves. Well, we're gonna hold you guys until we figure out how this whole thing blows over. We're gonna turn in your gun badges. Yep, because then that way, optics wise, the citizens are looking at it and say, okay, it's not a us versus them kind of dynamic going on. They're actually taking the steps to mitigate this and make sure that we solve this problem. But for right now, the way we look at it and the way officers, it's like they're in their own little club, and it creates this kind of us versus them kind of mentality where it's like now we're gonna huddle together. Now it's the whole state versus the people. Is that the kind of new America, the new world that we want to go into? I don't think so, because there's more of us than there is of them. Like, we have the power.
Yeah, and you know what? And I got to give props, because there are a lot of good cops out there. Because even during the George Floyd thing, I saw a great many officers who walked with protesters, who didn't agree with what happened to him and how that was handled. And I applaud them, because that's talk about stepping out the boat, not being part of the clique, but standing up for what's right.
Yeah.
You know, you gave your opinion, and I think it's because if a lot of more of that was done, maybe some of that rioting could have been stemmed.
Yeah.
Maybe some of that could have been prevented if you had a lot of law enforcement who stuck to this is right, this is wrong. It doesn't matter if we're cops or if we're not. If we do something just as bad as a citizen, we should be treated and held accountable just as much as a citizen.
Absolutely.
Should.
Absolutely.
There shouldn't be, oh, well, you're a cop, you know, well, we'll just do this and we'll do that, you know, and we'll get back to you, you know what I mean? You notice with the George Floyd situation, it did take a little bit, but once those riots and all that shit was hitting the fan all over the country and across and around the world, they had no choice but to go get them and say, all right, that's it, come on, man, you're done.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have to go that far, and that's why people are so pissed off. You got all these riots and all these protests going on, is because there is not enough accountability being held. That's just honestly what I think.
No, that